Hey people, welcome to the Run Tests, it's Kieran here. Now in June, I'm about to head out and take on one of the world's oldest and most iconic ultras, the Comrades Marathon with Marathon Tours and Travel. Been doing all my prep, getting my head into ultra mode, and it's kind of got me thinking. Over the years, I've now done around 30 ultras, everywhere from the UK to Europe and even into Africa. And what I thought I would do is pull together a list of the ultras that I have enjoyed most. Now this isn't a list of the best ultras in the world because there are loads and loads of cracking ultras that I am yet to do, but these are my favourites from across the distances from the 50k to the 100 miler. And I've included a pick here from everything from shorter coastal runs to good friendly beginner races to multi-stage ultras and even long mountain tests. So this is essentially a selection of really incredible tried and tested ultra runs that I think definitely could earn a space on your bucket list. So there should be something here for everyone, no matter what stage you're at. And if you're looking for inspiration to take a step up to ultra or to find your next big challenge, hopefully there's something on this list. So watch on to find out. First up, we've got the Big Feet, Big Sky Ultra. Now this is a 50k ultra run in Runner's Paradise, the New Forest, which is about an hour and a half south of London. Now this is a really wonderful rolling run with a really nice mix of terrain between kind of groomed trails, a bit of road, a bit of grass. It's got a bit of everything. It's also a really kind of balanced kind of with ups and downs. There's just enough climb, just enough descent. It's kind of rolling, it's happy, it's runnable. But the magic really is in the scenery that you're going to experience down there. You run through woodlands and forests and shade, and you break out onto these big moorlands, and the wildlife is absolutely incredible. The highlight of this run is you'll get to see kind of wild ponies galloping alongside you if you're lucky. The New Forest ponies are iconic. There's also deer. There's all sorts of birds. There's, you name it. This is a stunning place to run. The other thing I really like about this is a really small event. There's about 300 runners tops that do this. There is a marathon distance, another shorter run, so it's quite close knit. There's a really it's actually set up by an endurance runner for endurance runners, so it's got that kind of vibe where the organisers know what people need. The aid stations are well stocked. There's really good support. The start is completely fuss and stress-free, and so is the finish. There's like a really nice kind of close-knit, kind of happy vibe, sort of family vibe that you get there. The camaraderie on course from the people out there is great. And I think the other thing about this race is if you're looking for a step up from like a city marathon, it's your first sort of venturing onto the trails or venturing to that kind of 50k distance. The first thing is 50k, obviously it's 30 odd miles. You're not stepping up too much in terms of that overall distance on top of the marathon. But the trails here aren't too technical. It's not too steep. And so it's really accessible if you're a beginner runner as well. And there's plenty of scenery to kind of take your mind off that extra little bit of pain. So if you're looking for something that takes you a little bit longer, going into your kind of first ultra, you want to go 50k, or you want something that maybe is a little bit shorter, you feel like you can attack if you've got experience of ultras, this is a really great one to go out and run. You're going to get some of the most spectacular kind of scenery, I think, in the UK in terms of trails. Nice and easy, not too much elevation, but enough so that you don't get bored on the flats. And yeah, just a really happy, beautiful start, beautiful finish, and one that I would really highly recommend. The latest pricing I have on this race was £58 for the Ultra entry. I don't think it's happening in 2023. I think you'll have to go for 2024 when the Ultra comes back. But check out Big Feet Events for more details on that. So next up, we're heading to the coast and the Endurance Life Classic Quarter, a 44-mile ultra along the Cornish coast in the southwest of England. So the task here is brutally simple. You run from the southernmost point of England, the Lizard Point in Cornwall, to the westernmost tip, which is Land's End, iconic place. If you know Le Jog, running from Land's End to John O'Groats, it finishes at Land's End, and you're basically just following the coast line all the way down. You kind of do like a quarter turn of the compass, hence the fact that it's called Classic Quarter. Now the 44-mile distance is kind of like a tempting step up from the marathon, or if you've done a marathon and gone to your 50k ultra, this feels like a natural next step to add in a little more distance over that. But the steep climbs and descents along the Cornish coast with around 1700 metres of climbing and descending and the technical trails make this a pretty tough challenge indeed. Now I first ran this back in 2013, and aside from the absolute stunning beauty of this course, the one thing that I remember very distinctly was the last 8 miles of this, which were hugely technical, very steep and very difficult. Now it felt like for a long time across those last 8 miles you could see Land's End off in the distance, but you kept running along, you dropped down into these bays and then have to climb back up and down into a bay and climb back up, and it seemed to go on forever. I'd run up to that last 8 miles really well. I felt in control. When I hit that, the race slowed down, and it's a really tough challenge indeed. But steadily moving towards that kind of iconic finish location is everything that you need to kind of drag yourself up and down all of those climbs. Now, if you're in the process of training for something that's a little bit more challenging, like a mountain ultra or something, you're looking for somewhere to go to get a good test of the legs, then this race actually will be a good challenge, I think, and is a good stepping stone on the way to far harder challenges. Not least because that finish makes it a brilliant kind of mental proving ground. You have to dig mentally quite deep. The race takes place in May each year, so you often get hot weather as well, and it's going to set you back £75 for the ultra entry fee if you're running solo, though you can run in teams as well. Now, next up is a race that I've been back to time and time again. It's part of the Threshold race series that also includes the Race to the King. This one is the Race to the Stones. I've done both of those, but the Race to the Stones is one that I keep going back to. It was my second ever 100k, and it takes you from a small village called Lucknow to Avebury along the Ridgeway, which is one of the oldest sets of trails in the UK. It's absolutely stunning, the highlight of which really is when you get to the end, just before the finish, you go out and do a little lap of a stone circle at Avebury, a very, very famous kind of Stonehenge style stone circle in Avebury before you go into finish. If you're lucky, you hit that stone circle just as the sun's coming down, you get these amazing finishers photos. That never happened to me. I was either always too slow or too fast. But yeah, it's absolutely wonderful and a brilliantly iconic place to finish. You know, you get a bit of a taste of everything on this, from small villages and little towns, you know, quaint little bits of England, up through kind of woodlands and woodland trails. You get some sort of hills and you get some rolling downs. You get kind of, then you're up on top of the Ridgeway. You run through, at some point you break out into the Field of Dreams, they call it, but essentially it's high poppy fields where the trail, this sort of narrow trail, cuts straight down the centre, and it is a classic moment when you break out into that. It's one of those that just makes you go, wow, I'm so glad I came and did this race. You know, you're running through fields and it's just a wonderful course. Woodlands, riversides, ridge trails, none of it too steep, none of it too technical. Now, one of the challenges with the Race to the Stones is really how you run it, because it's very inviting to go and attack this because there's not too much crazy climbing. You can also split the race over 2 days, so you can do 50k one day, camp, and then do a 50k another day, so it's nice and accessible. And I think that's the other thing about the Race to the Stones. This is a run that attracts quite a lot of newcomers to ultra running, and the whole event is geared up to that. From the aid stations, which are stocked like some of the best sweet shops I've ever seen. They're famous for having everything you could ever want. My 8-year-old son was in absolute heaven when he came and did it when he was a little bit younger. Well, when he didn't do it, but he was there. He wasn't running, he was just eating sweets. And yeah, but from the support, from the crew, and from the other runners that you'll encounter on course, there are many people here who are experiencing this kind of distance and this kind of trail challenge for the first time. And that creates this kind of wonderful atmosphere on the course where you feel, you know, you're in good company for this. Now, to give you an indication of the challenge of this, I think there's about 3,000 runners might enter across the different distances, and the finish rate is around 90%. So 90% of the people complete this. So it's a challenging run, but it is very doable. The cut-offs are very forgiving. The aid stations are regular. You know, it's all really well marked. You're going to be really well looked after. You have the opportunity to do it as a team, or you can do it solo. And it tends to take place right at the beginning of July. So you're often guaranteed pretty good weather. It can be hot. I have been there when some days it's been quite punishing when you're out there for a long time. But at the same time, in that sunshine, moving through the English countryside when it's kind of almost at its best and there's the sights and sounds and smells, it's an absolute magic experience, and one that I would really highly recommend. It's not cheap. A standard non-stop entry for the Race to the Stones will cost you about £175. But believe me, if you take a big enough bag, you'll make all that back in all the sweets and cakes you can fit in. So you've done your 50k trail, you've done your coastal ultra, you've done your 100k, and now you're looking for something a little bit meatier and you're thinking, I know, I'm going to go to the mountains. Where are you going to go? Now, this next race is a race that is absolutely mind-blowingly gorgeous. It is a beautiful race. I think it's one of the most beautiful races anywhere in the world. It is called the Lavaredo Ultra Trail. It is now part of the UTMB series. It takes place in the Italian Dolomites. It's 120 kilometers in distance, and there is about sort of 6,000 meters of climbing and descending to do. It starts and finishes in a beautiful little Italian mountain town called Cortina, and it is everything that you want in a mountain race. It starts with an epic town square start with a brilliant anthem. It also starts at night, so you go out, I think, around 11 o'clock at night, and first thing you do is get fired into the mountains, onto the trails, up steep climbs in the night with your head torch on, having had no sleep. Often there's been a storm and the air is just cleared. It's nice and fresh, and all you see are the trails of headlights climbing up the mountain. It is epic, and it's such an adventure. And essentially what you're doing is you're making your way through the Dolomites, lots of steep climbs, past the Tre Cime, classic, iconic vista in the Dolomites of the three mountains, the three chimneys, I think they believe they're called. And yeah, if you're lucky, you get there just as the sun's coming up, but you've got to be a fast runner for that. I never have. I've still been hacking my way up the hills further back when that's happened, but you'll see the iconic photos and they look magic. Now there's a few unique challenges around this race. The first is that it happens in June. It's often very, very hot. And so though you get that first night in the cool, you end up running through very, very hot kind of midday sun. The other thing is that in terms of that kind of 5,800 meters of climb you're going to do, the biggest climb of those comes at around 80 kilometers when you're absolutely on your arse. I know I've DNF'd this race twice, it's beaten me twice, and it's that big climb that has always gotten me. I've been hacking up that big climb for like 4 hours, got to the top of it and I've been beaten twice. So it's stunning and it's tough. It's not quite UTMB tough, but this is a race that has kind of filled my soul and kicked my ass twice. And one day I will still go back to it, and I still dream of doing those trails and Dolomites over again, even outside of the race. That's how beautiful and picturesque it is. It's recently got a little bit more difficult to get into because of the ballot system, and it's oversubscribed, and the UTMB kind of entry system has complicated things. It's €169 to enter it. It happens in June, and it is a wonderful, wonderful experience. You have to go prepared though. This is a mountain race which will take quite a lot out of you. It's not the easiest, but it's such an experience. So one I would highly recommend, even though I haven't finished it twice. Now I couldn't make a list of my favourite ultras without talking about this one. This one is pretty much the granddaddy. Most people will have heard of it at some point or other. And this is the Marathon des Sables, the classic multi-stage ultra across the Sahara Desert in Morocco. And you know, it's self-styled the world's toughest ultra. It probably isn't, but this is a massive test of endurance, but not just of your kind of lungs and legs. It's mainly a test of how well you can manage your own logistics and do your kind of kit, all of that kind of stuff. It's a bigger challenge beyond the running itself. It's a magical, magical experience, and one that I will never ever forget. Now, if you've not encountered it before, this is about a 250 kilometre or 150 miles, give or take, multi-stage race where you do 6 days of running. It approximates to like a marathon distance for the first 3 days, then somewhere around 80, 90 to 100 Ks for the long stage. You get a rest day, and then you finish off with a marathon on the last stage. All of this is done through the Moroccan Sahara, so we're talking about a real kind of mix of terrain. Yes, you're going to have those kind of iconic sort of days where you're dragging through the sand dunes and you're going through, but a lot of it is across these kind of dried up, huge, vast flatlands. And then also you're climbing up what they call jebels, so we're talking about kind of sand dune mountains. And by that, you know, you're not talking about the sand dunes that you find on your local beach. These things are steep, massive, high sand mountains that you often need a rope to climb up. It is a testing and challenging environment. Often you're running in 30 degrees heat. You've got to carry all your own kit. You've got to be self-sufficient. That means all of your fuel, food, clothes, head torch, obligatory kit. You've got a flare. There's all sorts of stuff that you've got to carry on your back. Water, a limited ration of water to get you through the day in terms of stage to stage, but also a limited ration of water in the evening to cook your food. You have to take all your own calories. The only thing you don't take are your tents. You sleep in open-sided tents that they put up in the bivouac every night. They're challenging in themselves. The wind blows through at night. There's about 7 of you, or 7 or 8, I think, sort of sardined onto these small rugs as well. So it's very close quarters. Everyone smells. You don't wash. It is magic. When I did it, I arrived under the cover of darkness. There was one other runner that I knew. You sort of climb into a tent, and then you wake up in the morning, and the 6 people who are lying next to you are your teammates, and you become friends and you help each other out. And you know, a big part of it is the camaraderie that you have. You kind of clap in all your runners. You share items that you need. You help each other get through the challenge. Tell stories and war stories each night. It's just a magical kind of experience that I think. Yeah, it's beyond running. It's very expensive. It's about £4,500, I think, in the most recent price. They've changed the prices each year, so you need to check that out. So this is definitely a once-in-a-lifetime event, and it's it's obviously hugely expensive, but it's more than just a run. This is a life experience that you know, kind of thing that you'll tell your grandkids about. I did it back in 2015. Somehow managed to come in the top 100, but I think one of the most remarkable things about this race was watching the different abilities, different people, different shapes, different sizes. You know, although this is kind of billed as this kind of really, really tough challenge, and it is very difficult and lots can go wrong, it's also very doable and an experience that, you know, if you've got the right mindset and you've got the right kind of the will to get out there and do it, that it's kind of open to anyone. You know, I believe anyone can go and do it. And believe me, when you cross that finish line, having finished this race, it is a feeling and something you'll look back on, and it is such an important part of my overall kind of running journey. Yeah, it's just something that forevermore you look back and you think, well, if I can manage that and I can cope with that, then there's not much else that kind of, everyday life throws at you that, you can't get your head around. So yeah, definitely worth it if you can afford it, or you get the opportunity to go and do something like this. The Marathon des Sables is just a very, very special race. Now, if you fancy a Marathon des Sables style challenge, but you don't feel ready yet to take on the Sahara, or you want to do something that's a little bit cheaper, maybe you don't fancy doing that overall distance, so you want to taste something a bit smaller first, then there is another option, the Half Marathon des Sables. It's a breakaway organisation, not run by the same people, but they splintered off and they licensed the name, and they've set up a bunch of runs that happen in Peru, in Egypt. There's one in Fuerteventura. You can actually now go back into the Sahara in Morocco as well if you want to. But essentially what you're getting is it's basically half the distance in half the days, but mainly you're running in kind of similar conditions, sand dunes, dried up kind of riverbeds, rocky climbs. It's very, very similar in terms of the conditions. The one that I did was Fuerteventura, and it was 3 days. You do 125 kilometers. So the stages are broken down in a kind of similar way, where you've got shorter days, one long day which tries to break. You've got limited water. You've got to carry all your own kit as well. Half the calories, I guess, because you're only going for half the days. And you are running in Fuerteventura. I mean, it's no less challenging. This, I think it's almost like the same amount of difficulty just for half the time. So you're in the same amount of pain just for half the time that you would be in the pain for the MDS. So arguably, yeah, you're happier when the day's finished, but you sort of reach that level where it's similar for those 3 days. And yeah, it's a very, very challenging course. You've got these kind of never-ending long stretches of soft sand beaches. There are dunes. There are kind of big kind of cliff climbs. And of course, you've still got those really hot temperatures. So to give you an indication, the price for the Half Marathon des Sables Fuerteventura is around €1,750. Depends on the accommodation you get and where you're coming from. Those prices do vary, so you need to look into that. But that'll give you a ballpark, so it's much, much cheaper than the full Marathon des Sables. You get a slightly different experience as well. You don't sleep in the open-sided tents. You all get individual tents on the bivouac. Those tents get really hot. So one difference, everyone comes out of the tents and actually congregates in the centre, which makes for a bit more of a nice kind of crossover from the runners from all different nationalities. Whereas in the Marathon des Sables, people tend to stick with their tent mates in their tent. There's a really, really nice kind of socialisation of everyone on these Half Marathon des Sables, and that's a bit of a difference, which I really liked. So again, you end up meeting people who become friends for life from all over the world, and that really adds to the experience. So yeah, if you fancy a little taste of the MDS, this is a good way to have a look at it and get a feel for it. Now, I've saved this one for last because I think the 100 miler is one of the biggest ultra challenges you can do. I mean, there are bigger, you can do the 200 miler, but I think this one is a proper test of more than just your running ability. And yeah, I think this is something you kind of migrate to often sort of last after you've done all those other things. You could obviously do 100-mile mountain ultras, which make it even more difficult. But the race I've chosen for 100 miler is the Centurion Thames 100. Now, this is part of the very popular Centurion race series that also includes the North Downs Way 100 miler and the South Downs Way 100. It is my first and only 100 miler that I've done. And unlike those other two that I've mentioned, this one is absolutely pancake flat. It follows the Thames from Richmond to Oxford and has only 560 metres of climbing in the whole 100 miles. Now, this obviously starts at Richmond, West London, and sort of heads you out, and you go through lots of different towns. So there's some kind of slightly urban stuff, but all of it following the beautiful River Thames on river paths. You end up running into the countryside through fields. There are a billion gates to open and close. You're running past boats. You're running past people having barbecues on boats. There's beautiful pubs. Now, you're following the banks of the River Thames pretty closely at times, so you've got these kind of picture perfect areas of countryside when you break out from the urban sort of centres where you might run through Reading and places like that. And then you just basically get to feel like you're in the countryside. There's cows, there's all sorts. It's magic. And at night, when you're running along that river and you're getting a bit of a chill air coming back and the stars are in the sky, and yeah, it's just a really wonderful place to run. Occasionally, the route will send you up and over a bridge, which is blessed relief because it's so flat. For the short period where you climb up and go over, you get to use different muscles. And this is one thing, people say this is actually a harder race than going on the kind of North Downs Way where it's kind of hills, just because it's interminably flat. There is no difference. You're using exactly the same muscles pretty much the whole way. But the one thing I'll say I think really stands out from this race and Centurion races in general is the aid stations and the support and the crew. They're all staffed by people who understand the challenge that you're taking on intrinsically, either because they've done it or they just know what you need. I've had people towards the end coming into the last aid station. I was about to sit down on a chair and the guy just took the chair away from me and said, "Get going," because he knew that if I sat in the chair, I would stop and I probably wouldn't move. So, they read you and they know they'll hand you things, they'll make you drinks, they'll fill your water bottles. There's loads of food. They look after you, make sure that you're going out with your spirits raised from when you came in, because you can come in quite beaten up and a bit emotional, a bit miserable. And they do their very best to lift you and keep you moving along that course and help you out. And that is something I will never forget. That support means a lot when you're digging this deep into what took me 26 hours, but some people, it's longer. It can take, some people are faster, but you're largely going to be running for 24 hours if you're kind of a mid-level runner. The Centurion Thames Path 100, a magic race, tracking the really historical River Thames, an absolutely fabulous run as you head towards the source. It happens in May, so the next one is in 2024, and it's about £215 to enter. Again, not cheap, but again, once you've done this once in a lifetime, this will set a new normal if you can complete this 100-miler. So there you have it. That has been a list of ultras that I think make a brilliant journey from your first ultra right up to taking on something like a 100-miler or an epic multi-stage race. I hope you've enjoyed the list. There's bound to be races out there that you've done that I've missed off or you think are the greatest. Hit me up in the comments below. I'd love to hear about other races that you think people shouldn't miss. Good races in the UK or beyond that people will love and enjoy. Let's build out that list to help people find really good races to go and do. What are your challenges coming up? Love to hear about them. Have you got ultras planned in? Let us know as well. What you're training for, what you hope to do one day. Always love to hear about those things. What kind of dreams have you got? Otherwise, it's been a pleasure to talk to you about these races, and I hope to see you again soon on the Run Testers. Thank you for listening, and good luck with whatever it is that you're doing out there. Happy running, people.